Go ahead.
Thanks, Heather. All right, so hi everybody. I'm really happy to see a lot of faces here. I actually come from a publisher before I worked at EBSCO, so this is near and dear to my heart. So just so I know the audience that I'm talking to. So who here is a taxonomist or an indexer? Can you raise your hand? Yeah, okay. So who here deals with metadata and data of all sorts? Oh, good. Okay, great. So I'm speaking to the right audience. That's good. I just wanted to know if I had to go over some more of this stuff that we've already gone over, but we don't have to do that. So interoperability. So there's a few different ways to talk about this. Mapping, ontologies, right? This is actually something that helps. You can use it as a browse, right? You can make this visual for your users, but you can also bake it into your search engine, which is something that EBSCO does. All right, so background. Why do you even want to map terms? So we all have users that we are publishing for, and actually users depending on who your author is, right? So they're your users too. So what is a good thing to do when you're doing a mapping project? First, you need to identify who your audience is. So if you're doing it for something to bake into your search engine, so semantic search, everyone has heard of this, I'm sure has heard of semantic search. This actually helps function behind the scenes to help with that. And so when you do some mapping, right, you're talking to the user that you already know, but you're also talking to the users you don't even know yet. Because when somebody knows the terms that you use in your own taxonomy, or not even terms, it could just be the language that's used in your articles and your publications. That's the language that they know the best. But multidisciplinary search, right? Multidisciplinary research. This is something that everybody is hitting on. If you want a grant, hey, is it multidisciplinary? Yes or no? How can we facilitate better multidisciplinary search? Mapping is one way to do that. And so EBSCO, because it's an aggregator, we're getting all these different terms in from people. How do we actually make that a useful thing, not a confusing thing for our mutual users? And not even just our mutual users, right? So if you have something that's being discovered through a mapping technique that's baked into the search, it's actually going to help you if people don't know who you are. I'm doing a multidisciplinary search. I work in psychology. I don't know anything about, let's say, who do I know that's in the audience? Materials engineering, for instance. So I'm in psychology. Maybe there's something that they do over in materials engineering that I need to know about, but I don't know anything about materials engineering. How do I find that? You find that through a mapping technique. So there are some issues that you need to contend with. So one, there's not a lot of linked vocabularies out there. So taking some of the stuff that Margie actually talked about, so linking all of this stuff together is very important. There's a lot of standards on how you actually link things together. Heather touched on some of them, but ISO 25964, 1 and 2. If you don't have it, go find it and read it a lot, because that's how you actually make this stuff work. It's very easy to read, very easy to understand, and it's how do you connect not just your vocabulary. So that's what we're mainly talking about here, but the other metadata that you guys have. So publishers, right? So DOI, everybody know DOI? Yes? Yes, we all love DOI, right? That gets people to our content. That's a piece of linked data. That's basically all we're talking about here, except with terms. So think of it that way. Some other things, there's governance and provenance issues where if you get a vocabulary in, maybe you have a sister society that you work with, maybe another journal that you partner up with. You have no idea how they created their metadata. You have no idea how they created their terms. That's a problem. If you can document, please document as much as you possibly can. Make it like a README file or something to go along with the data that you have. Little understanding of what the users actually need. So search log data, as Margie pointed out, huge benefits with that, but you also need to understand what vocabulary these folks are using. So Google teaches everybody, right? So you go to Google and you say, okay, Google, tell me what my automobile manufacturer is. Well, if you don't see the results that you want, you change the way that you search so that you actually do find that information. So you get immediate gratification, right? So Google gets back to you and says, hey, here's the stuff. And you say, yeah, that's what I was looking for. Or, nope, that's not what I was looking for. How can I change that? Google's teaching people how to search. So therefore, when they come and do a search log, right? So if you're going into the search log, all you're seeing is how Google has taught people to search and how other search aggregators have taught people to search. So another way of getting at information is actually talking to people. And I know Margie said that doesn't work all the time. I'm not saying it will work for everybody. But especially if you're a publisher and you have a very dedicated group of people that are always going to be your main group that you're talking to, subject matter experts, certain students, certain schools. You could go and talk to them and find out what do they actually mean when they talk about this stuff. Because when they stick it into the search engine, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the information that they're looking for. That might be what their professor said. You don't know how they're actually doing the search. So maintenance is another issue. Non-digitized content, I want to point this one out because you guys are the publishers. You guys are the ones who have this problem, and it makes us have a problem too at EBSCO, because the more digitization we have, the better we can connect information to our users. All of our users. If we don't have anything digitized, it's just a flat image and it doesn't help anybody, including your users, including yourselves too. If you go to your own search within your actual content, your own company, how much stuff actually is digitized? That's another issue. Incomplete data is another thing that publishers can help with. Look at the strength and the weaknesses of your data. If you have weaknesses, it's not just a weakness for you. If it's confusing, it's not just a weakness for you. It's a weakness to your users who might not have any idea how to search for this stuff. All right, so there's other things here. I can send these slides. There's a lot of content, so I'm not going to go over all of it. But all that stuff I was talking about linking, here's a standard on how to actually link. So anybody has looked at search, semantic search, right? So there's that STAR system. If you guys don't know about it, go look it up. Tom Heath is the guy to go and look for. Linked open data is how you would do a search on that. This is a little bit different. It follows the same standards, but what it's talking about is how do you actually link within vocabularies specifically. So a lot of people only have 1-star data. That's okay. You at least, what's the saying? The first step is knowing you have a problem or acknowledging you have a problem. That's where you are if you're on number 1. Or if you don't even know where you are, that means you need to maybe go through, see what's the health on your vocabulary, your metadata. So again, I'm talking vocabularies. You can use this for metadata too. So the jargon for doing this mapping technique. So the source vocabulary is the terminology that you are mapping from. So that's your taxonomy or your vocabulary that you're already looking at. The target vocabulary are the stuff that you're targeting. You want to go out and say, okay, if I want to use mesh, I want to map mesh to my stuff. How do I do that? Well, mesh is going to be your target. So when you start reading through some of the documentation, I have a ton of stuff at the end of the slides so you can go through and read up on all of this. These are 2 things you really want to keep in mind because that's basically the vocabulary everybody uses in this content. Okay, so if you've never done any mapping, don't worry, I did some work for you. You don't have to go and do any research. So what I did is I went through some case studies. So these are all vocabulary case studies. This is not just metadata. So usually when you're talking about linked data, everybody has heard linked data, right? Yep. So most of the time they're talking about linked data, you're talking about DOI, ISBN, those kind of things. Well, vocabulary can be linked data too. Here are some case studies on how that actually works because it's really difficult to do research in this. If you type in linked data on vocabularies, well, SCOS is a linked vocabulary. Dublin Core is a vocabulary. But that's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about the actual subject indexes that we all use to tag our content with what is this thing about. So that is what these things are doing. So I went out and I found some case studies for you so you don't have to actually go out and find them. They're very difficult to find and identify what they are. So basically what I did here is I went through and I said, what are they used for? I tried to find a lot of different vocabulary situations so that kind of applies to a lot of different case studies that are in here. I actually went through and told you what the name was, what domain. So as you can see, I did try to do a broad swath through that, and then the actual source. And the source is there because at the end of the slides, that's the study that stuff is from, so you can go back and read it. All right, so how do you actually do this mapping thing? So here are the most common ways to do it. So what this is telling you is depending on how many vocabularies you want to map, dictates what kind of mapping technique you want to use. So the most common that you see is crosswalks, right? So everybody know who the Getty is? So that's arts and stuff. They're very well-known linked data vocabulary. They do a crosswalk. There's a lot of mesh crosswalks between other things like Mtree or Sinol. There's these mapping techniques that are a 1-to-1 ratio. But as you can see, the more taxonomies you get, the harder you have with your job, right? So you have 20 now that you have to do this one-to-one mapping. It's really difficult to do. Or you can use a hub structure, which is actually fantastic for people like you with publishers, because what you can do is say, I love my taxonomy. I have invested in this thing. It's great. So this is what I need to do. I need to map everything to my taxonomy so that my users, whether they're coming in from Mesh or if they're coming in from CINAHL, they actually know already what they're searching for. They can use those same exact terms to find content because it's already mapped to yours. So it's actually connecting it for them so they don't have to crack the code on anything, which is really important. All right, this is a packed slide. I'm not going to go through all of this, but what I did want to do is to tell you, again, I can send these slides to anybody that wants them. Come find me and we can do that. Anything that's in green are the most important. And basically what you're seeing here is crosswalks and the switch hub model that I was just talking about. Those are the most used and give you the most benefit. So all of these different criteria on the side, going through all that research, again, I did the work for you, you don't have to. There's all of these different things that are considerations when you're talking about mapping and doing linked data. So depending on what your use case is, you might not care about documentation or IP issues. You're a publisher, so I'm sure IP issues are something you do care about. But these are going through and showing you, okay, based on these criteria, based on all of these other things that we're talking about, what's the best structure for me to use? So we're going to go through and talk to you about what EBSCO uses as the main primary use case. But I did want to also throw up here a lot of other use cases that you can go and look at if you don't need something that's as robust as EBSCO, or you could just partner with us and then you don't have to worry about it. There's my little plug, sorry. All right, so that's the conclusion of my part. I know I sped through that very quickly. There's a lot of different pieces and nuggets that I could go through. But I can say that I am obviously more than willing to talk to you about this stuff. So with that, the resources are at the end of our slides. And I'm going to hit off with Nick now.